Hello and welcome to my video game sound design series on Massive. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do some sci-fi beeps and boops. Now, there are many categories of beeps and boops, but we're going to start with some old school kind of aggressive sounds. Now, we're going to be making these sounds together from scratch, so if you're following along, just click File, New Sound, so we start completely from scratch in Massive. And I'm also going to be posting a copy of the patch in the description below, so you can download this and use this for yourself. You don't have to ask for permission or anything. This can be used in whatever the heck you want to use it in if you own Massive. So today, again, like I said, sci-fi beeps and boops. This is probably one of many that we're going to have in sci-fi user interface sounds. So we're going to have some old school sci-fi beeps, boops, kind of rough, aggressive sounds. So we're going to start off in our oscillator section, which is generally a good spot to start in Massive when you're designing anything. So with oscillator 1, the first thing I'm going to do is choose my wavetable. Now, what I'm going to do is start with Digigrain 2, as it's called, which lives right over here. So it's in the digital hybrid column, Digigrain 2. Now, the only reason I know that this one will work for what we're doing is that I've used Massive a lot in the past, and with that experience, you start to learn what each of these sound like. So I'm just going to play some notes with Digigrain 2. That's the only sound that's going to be happening. And then from there, I'm going to play the sound as it progresses. But this is just oscillator 1. So already buzzy, already aggressive, already a good starting point. And this sound in general is going to be pretty simple. We're going to start easy. So I want this sound to be thicker. I want more oomph to it. I want more satisfaction to these beeps and boops. So I'm going to turn on oscillator 2. And for the second wavetable, I'm going to choose one called Sonic, which lives again in digital hybrid. So I'm going to choose Sonic, and now I'll play that for you. So this is oscillator 1 and 2 together at the same time. You can hear that it's more complicated. It's a little more aggressive. It has kind of a metallic bell-like tone underneath it. And we want more. We want some more complexity. So I'm going to turn on oscillator 3. Now, what I'm going to do for this third waveform is choose one, or wavetable rather, is choose one that has kind of a funny name, and it's called duck organ. So I'm going to choose duck organ as my third one. Let's see, it's right here in digital hybrid again. You can tell I like this category, so duck organ. So now let's listen to all three of these at once. So much more aggressive, already getting much more buzzy, which is kind of what I want. Again, I want that old school sci-fi beep and boop aggressive sound. So this is our starting point. Now, what I'm going to do is play around with these wavetable positions, these intensities, these amplitudes, all that good stuff, and narrate what I'm doing. So in this first oscillator, this grain 2, I'm going to turn this wavetable position back just a little bit to get a bit of a different sound. Takes a little bit of that edge off. And in Sonic, we're going to do the same. Just take this back a little. Makes it sound almost like it's a humming fluorescent light sort of deal. With the stuck organ, I'm just going to leave this alone. I kind of like where it is right now. But we're going to play around with these amp knobs now, these amplitude knobs. So how loud each oscillator is. Now, I really like grain 2, this first oscillator, so I'm going to leave that alone. I really like the sound of that. But I don't want all three of these to be equally loud. And generally, when you make sounds, you don't want all three oscillators to be just as loud as one another. Sometimes you do, but usually you'll have kind of one dominant one and a couple that are supporting. So in this case, I'm going to turn Sonic and this duck organ one down just a little bit. So let's hear it now. So it's more aggressive, it's a little more layered, that's great. Now I'm going to play with these intensity knobs, which in spectrum mode does something different than all of these other modes. And again, if you want to refresh your knowledge on Massive, you can go through my tutorial series in this playlist so you can learn how Massive works. So I'm going to turn these intensity knobs down. Just like, let's say about there. Let's see how that sounds. Okay, that's a great starting point for some sci-fi beeps and boops. It's not there, obviously, but we're getting there. It's aggressive, it's biting, it's buzzy. We're getting closer and closer. So with beeps and boops for user interface sounds, usually, not always, but usually, they're not really pitched. They're not musical sounding. Or in this case, I don't want them to be musical sounding. I want them to sound old school and kind of out of tune, or not in a specific key or anything like that. So to do that, what I'm going to do is play around with these pitch sections right here. So in this first one, I'm just going to kind of pick a random number, honestly. I just want these to all be out of pitch with one another. And when I pitch these up and down, I'm just going to go in between pitches. So I'm not going to go by semitones specifically. I'm going to go in between semitones as well. So it's really not a pitched sound. No one could pick out like, oh, that's an A, that's an E, anything like that. I'll leave sonic alone, and I'll also pitch this duck organ. Let's do like 4. Sure, let's do around there. So these are all kind of out of pitch with one another. They're in between pitches. I'm not doing just semitones. So let's play around with that and hear how it sounds. So you can hear they're not in tune with one another, which is great. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Okay, so we're more or less done with this oscillator section for now, but that doesn't mean the sound is done. There's a lot more character we can add to this. It's not quite what we're looking for. So let's go down to this modulation oscillator. Now, you remember in my tutorial series that this section, this modulation oscillator, is very useful for creating aggressive, biting, cutting sounds. So that's perfect. That's exactly what we're using this for. So I'm going to use the ring modulator on oscillator 1, which again, very good for creating aggressive sounds. So I want to make grain 2 or digigrain 2 more aggressive. So let's turn that on, and we're going to play around with this pitch so we can hear it. So I'm going to hold down a key and kind of turn this pitch up so you can hear what it's doing. Okay, cool. I'm starting to like that. Again, it's not there. It's kind of like a haircut. Halfway through, it's going to look, or in this case, sound pretty terrible. But at the end, it all kind of comes together and you'll be like, oh, awesome. This sounds great, or this looks great. So the next thing I'm going to do is play around with this noise. So as you remember, this noise channel just gives unpitched information to the sound. I'm going to turn this noise all the way up so you can hear the kind of whoosh sort of sound it gives. Now, we don't want that much, so I'm going to turn this down and keep this pretty subtle. I'm going to make the noise pretty subtle and make it so the color isn't such white noise, make it a little more mellow. So I just want a little bit of dirt in this sound, so which is why I'm adding this noise channel. So it's barely distinguishable, but that's what I want. I want it to be pretty subtle so that when I play around with this, it's not super dirty, not super noisy, but it has just a little bit in there. So the next thing I'm going to add is a filter. So we're going to do a low pass filter on filter 1. And I'll just turn the cutoff all the way up to start. And what I'm going to do is play around with this cutoff and resonance knobs to start getting closer and closer to the sound we want. So when I turn this cutoff all the way up, it lets all the frequencies pass through, so the filter's not really doing a whole lot. So let me turn this knob down gradually, and we'll play around with this cutoff. You know what? I think I want this turned down just a hair. I don't want to cut off all those harsh frequencies and make this a really mellow sound. So let's just turn this down a hair. I think resonance is where we're going to get most of our character. So I'm going to play around with this resonance knob now. So you can hear we're starting to get kind of a hiss, metallic sort of sound in there, which is great. Again, I want aggressiveness. I want biting. I want cutting sound. So this is a good starting point for our low-pass filter. That resonance will boost frequencies around the cutoff point, so it'll add that kind of hiss to it in this case, which is great. So next up, I'm going to turn on an insert effect. So down here in insert 1. And I'm going to turn on sample and hold, which, if you remember, takes a sound and kind of quantizes it so that it chooses just a section of the sound and plays that back to you. So it makes it really aggressive and really cutting. Again, you're seeing a theme here. So let's play around with this and see what that sounds like. So you can hear it's adding a lot of kind of distortion almost to the sound. So I'm going to pitch this up. I don't want it to be that low pitch. Okay, so that's making it a little more character that I'm looking for. And I'm going to turn the dry wet knob up a bit so we hear more of that sample and held sound. And again, if you don't know what that is, go through my tutorial series. I explain all of this. Okay, cool. So it's starting to get there. It's starting to get closer. Again, aggressive, biting, cutting, all that good stuff. So next up, I am going to go over to this effects section, the master effects, and turn on some reverb, which is an effect that you will use all the time, no matter what kind of sound you're using. I'm not going to have this be super crazy. I'm not going to turn this on way, way high. So I'm going to turn the dry wet knob down immediately and the size down right away as well, and we'll play around with it and see how that sounds. Oh, that's getting pretty close. So let's turn the size down. Let's change the color of the sound of the room. Let's go around there, and let's play around with density as well. Okay, cool. So let's take that. I'm going to turn the master knob of the sound up just so this whole thing gets louder. It got a little quieter going through a filter and reverb and all that sort of good stuff. So now let's play around with it. That should get us a pretty decent beep, aggressive kind of error sound in Sci-Fi user interface stuff. That's awesome. That's exactly what we were looking for. So we can play around with this and make this more and more crazy. Depending on which octave you play, it'll sound more or less like what you're looking for. So if I pitch this down really, really far, it's going to sound really weird. But that might be what you're looking for. Or if I pitch this really high up, warning, high-pitched sound. So it gets kind of more distorted and kind of buzzy as we get higher and higher. And lower in pitch is kind of more distinct. And kind of in between is kind of where I like it. And of course, you can add more reverb to it if you want it to linger or tail longer, which might be what you're looking for. So this is it. This is our initial Sci-Fi error, beep, and boop patch. So I'm going to upload this and have a download link for you underneath the description of this video, so you can download it and use it on your own projects, however you want to use it. Take it, modify it. That's the whole point of these. This isn't the final point. You can modify the heck out of it and use it however you want. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please sign up for my newsletter. Again, that's where I share all of my best stuff for those of you who want a career in the game industry. So for those of you who are serious about getting paid for your work, which is pretty important, and getting paid well for it, sign up for my newsletter and download my ebook on getting paid for your work, how to charge clients, all that sort of good stuff, learning the business skills so that you can create all the best stuff you possibly can. And of course, watch my talk from GDC Europe, where I talked about the sound design of Hyper Light Drifter. So I went into detail during that 25-minute talk, where I just shouted about all of the details behind the sound design of the game Hyper Light Drifter. So feel free to watch that. It's in the description, annotation, cards, all that good stuff. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.